Hi, I'm Kevin Brown, Managing Director of Security at BT. And today I'm going to be joined by Tris Morgan, the Director for our Security Advisory Services, and David Stark, the Director for the Security Portfolio. Now, we've often spoken about Corona and its impact and what it means to businesses, and the majority of the time it's been a discussion about the remote working. How do I have my home worker accessing the systems? But there's a new part of Corona that we're now seeing. As businesses are resetting their strategy for their business, it's inevitably leading to a reduction in their workforce, and with that, the increase in the insider threat. So Tris, I'm going to come straight to you, and it'd be great to get your thoughts on what you're seeing.
Thanks, Kevin. So when we're looking at information protection, and particularly insider threat, there's three key things to consider. The first is around where is your data. Secondly, once you know where your data is, it's about appropriately understanding the type of data and tagging it. And thirdly, and most importantly, it's about understanding the risk to an organisation and to a person. So coming back to the first point, data these days is everywhere. Organisations have moved at pace and migrated much of their workloads, applications and data into numerous cloud providers. And doing so has brought huge benefits to organisations, but equally and often the pace of this transformation has meant that data has been moved without really understanding where it's going. Once organisations understand where the data is, the next key thing is to really go through and look at the type of data and appropriately identify it. Is it personal information? Is it information that's highly regulated like payment card, GDPR? Or is it information that relates to a company's very sensitive assets, IPR, and mergers and acquisitions and so on? And once you can really understand that data, you can then look to deploy the right controls around it to minimise the risk. And that leads on to the last point around the risk. So there's much in the way of risk to an organisation, and some recent stats that came out showed that when an organisation loses an employee, they typically take between 30 and 50% of their data with them. And that's a big problem, isn't it? Particularly that information leaking out. And unfortunately, in the current climate, with many companies looking to reduce their workforce, that's going to become ever much more a prevalent threat. The second thing, when we're thinking about through the eyes of a cyber criminal, if your data is stored in unknown locations, it isn't protected, the ability to access that and exploit companies for malicious and financial gain is absolutely there, which makes understanding where your data is, what it is, and the risk to an organisation at a person and at a site level is ever more important. So David, would you like to tell us more about some of the security controls that we can use and bring to bear to help with the visibility and the control of this?
Thanks, Tris. And just picking up on that consistent theme of understanding data and where it is. So the first thing is you've got to get back to understanding what your baseline is. Make sure that you really understand the groups of employees that you have, or use a persona approach to classify them. So you make sure that you know who should have access to what data and who shouldn't. And then, using that information, look at your existing tools. Most companies will have a DLP and they have access management, so it's something like a Active Directory, and start making sure that they're properly implementing the policies around that data and those groups of users. And then look at how are you managing your access to cloud services. So in the first instance, start making sure you've got a cloud-based access management capability in place, such as Okta or Azure Active Directory. Think about how you control access to wide-ranging collaboration and file sharing services using something as like a cloud proxy such as Zscaler to control access to that. And then adopting that persona approach, you can bring in something like a cloud access security broker, which will give you a much more granular approach to applying controls on a per persona basis, where you're controlling what is being accessed in terms of data from where and by whom and on what device, for example. Think about additional protections for the particularly high-end personas who have access to very sensitive information, so they can make use of things like endpoint detection remediation capabilities such as CrowdStrike to ensure that you've got additional control and visibility over what's being accessed from non-corporate devices. And then finally, what you can do is layer on top of that a SIEM service where you've got use cases that are particularly focused on insider threat, so you can spot things as they happen. So for example, getting visibility of what's happening in your Office 365 cloud. So with that, back over to you, Kevin.
Well, thanks, David, and thanks, Tris, for some quite detailed insight there. But I just wanted to try and summarise this now with 3 clear points. Point 1 I would suggest is the recognition that we're in a new phase now of business transformation. Point 2 is data. Where is it? Who has access? Recognising your higher risk personas. Then point 3, that stat that Tris mentioned, 30 to 50% of the data will leave your building with an individual, is pretty worrying. So therefore, it's a team game. It's around raising that awareness within the organisation, turning on your human firewall. Everyone has a role to play in this. Back that up with the right security controls, doing the right activity, and then finally making sure that the well-being, the exit plans you have for your colleagues is the best experience as possible given the circumstances. So I hope you found these points interesting, and I look forward to talking to you again soon. Thanks for listening.